a new course in Gastown this year, an exciting technical course, particularly as you approach the east end and steady up for the finish. And away they go, vying for position, vying for race speed, as Peter had told us they must do at the start of this course. Part of the course is here at Maple Tree Square, and now the bodies fly. This is the second group. It's a bouncing group, isn't it? But oh, that can take the skin off your legs and other parts of your anatomy. Some bashed and bruised elbows and thighs, some cobblestone pebbles from Gastown extracted from a thigh, but the race is still on.
When this course gets wet, it becomes very, very treacherous, especially on the cobblestone. There, coming through the Gassy Jack wedge, and on that final turn, coming through the start finish.
The Gastown Grand Prix event started in 1973. It was an idea by Dr. Roger Sumner. The first win in the men's race was by Bill Wilde. The first women's race was then in 1979, and it was won by Don Dealey. The event continued for 21 years until 1993. There was a small hiatus at that time, and it was brought back again in 2003 and went on till 2008. Again, there was a small break, but at that time, Global Relay chose to bring the event back in 2012. We've had a small break now between the 3 years during the COVID years. We're excited to bring this event back now in 2023 on its 50th anniversary since 1973. It's a special time to be able to bring an event back. We've got many of the athletes that were still taking part in the events in those early 70s coming out as guests. And we've got several of the athletes as well coming out that have been part of the event and won the event more than 2 or 3 times.
My name's Max Grace, and I rode the first Gastown race in 1973. Actually, I did 3 of them, 73, 74, and 75. Of course, didn't win the first one, which I would most certainly have liked to have done. But it took me a year to get revenge, so I won the second one in 1974, and I was 3rd in the race in 1975. My involvement in cycling, actually racing in Canada was what I termed my second career. I had a career competing in New Zealand. I'd started at an early age as a 13-year-old and had progressed up to the point where I was able to represent the country in the 1964 Olympics and was an alternate in the 68 Olympics. And I also had ridden the Worlds for New Zealand in 1966. We immigrated to Canada in 1969, not really having any plans to compete at all, but as it turned out, there was a 10-speed craze going on here, which brought about a whole new interest into the sport, and I got caught up in the wave of that and began to compete again. The first one was quite memorable as well. There was a gentleman's agreement that for the first 20 laps of the race, that the B category riders would be given a chance to win the preems for the first 20 laps. So the Cat 1 or the A Cat riders would hold back. And so that once 20 laps was over, then we came to the front and the speed went up, and I attacked in the race, and a small group of us got away until or maybe about a half a dozen laps before the finish, when I was able to get away again, taking along the eventual winner, Bill Wild, who had a very good finish. He was a good sprinter, and so it was really up to me to try and take his legs out, which is what I tried to do. But in this case, when we got down into the back straight, things got a little testy, and the handbags came out, and unfortunately I came off second best. Well, this race, of course, always had a lot of character. It had a lot of atmosphere to it, and that was right from day one. I mean, the crowds that came out to watch it always enjoyed it, and it's been popular ever since. And I think the event has got bigger and stronger and better through the years, and I mean, it's sustained itself now for 50 odd years. I hope this race continues on.
Throughout these years, when you look at it as an event organizer on the growth of the event, this community has really changed, particularly in the last 20 years. In the past, when it started, it was much more of a commercial area, and those commercial businesses are still there, but over these last 20 years, the residential growth has been growing immensely. And that has to be taken into consideration when you look at the infrastructure and the safety and the overall setup of the event. It's wonderful seeing the photos from back in the early 70s, how the events were run. There was very limited fencing. The start line was a banner that was just draping across the road. There was no need to be concerned about height restrictions for a fire truck to have to go under or anything in that regard. And it must have been a wonderful time, because it was an opportunity to just be really connected, really, with the spectators that were lining the roads. Things have progressed over the time, and we've got to, of course, be careful and manage the safety of the athletes, safety of the spectators, and everyone in the community. But what hasn't changed in that regard is the feel of the event. I only experienced the event since the late 80s and early 90s. But since that time, and if you speak to any of the athletes that have taken it part, and it doesn't matter if it is from '73 until now, the one thing that consistently resonates with all the athletes is the atmosphere of the event. And it's partly what has made it one of the most historic events in North America. The feel of the roads, with coming down Water Street being the most historic and oldest road in Vancouver, that cobblestone feel, that punishment that goes into the body from the vibrations. It is a very slight uphill to go along Water Street to get to Cordova. Typically, there's sometimes also a headwind during that section. So now you've got to navigate those elements with potential, a lot of times, punctures or flats that you have, and having to be able to come into the pit and repair that and be able to get back out into the race at the speeds that they go, all add to that element of coolness factor that this event brings. The other part is the noise the spectators have. There's only at the highest level of the events, when you have 30,000 spectators in such a tight area of 1 kilometer, banging on the boards, it sounds like thunder is rolling on behind you along Water Street. And with the announcers getting everyone's energy up, that continues to build throughout the course of the night and in each race. So as the events get past that halfway point, the noise just gets a little bit louder. As we get to 10 laps to go and 3 laps to go, every single time they try and make it louder and louder as the athletes come down Water Street throughout the start-finish line. And that's something that normally, typically as an athlete, you don't necessarily always hear everything that goes on with spectators in the stands in that regard, because you're so focused on the event. And that is true for that. But in the background, that rumbling is not, it's impossible to ignore and not experience and feel as the athlete in those final stretches and laps of the race. So when you combine all of those elements and the quality of the field that attends and the quality of the names of the athletes that have won this race, most of them have all gone on to represent their country at the Olympic Games, Commonwealth Games, Pan Am Games, World Championships, and have had very successful professional careers. That combination is what makes this event so special, and an event that every top athlete, not only in North America, but even now internationally, has put this event on their calendar annually and is an event that they would want to win in their life.
I got into the sport of cycling in grade 9. My dad and my uncle were both past Olympians in the 80s in the sport. And so in high school, a bunch of my guy friends convinced me to join the bike team, which there was a big cycling league in Victoria, BC. And my dad volunteered as the volunteer coach. So in that, we had 400 plus kids showing up to the races. There was 2 mountain bike races, 2 road races, and a time trial in that series. So that was my first intro into the sport and loved it. Got a bunch of good friends out of it. From there, I continued on to do some local races and BC Cups. Went to nationals eventually in grade 10 and 11. Made the junior worlds team as a mountain biker in '99. And then after that, decided to go on the road primarily, more suited to that. And raced on the national team and pro teams such as Webcor and Tipco for many years until 2011 when I retired.
Hello, my name is Bill Wild, previous winner of Gastown in 1973 and 76. All the riders I knew, they just waited for that day in the year. It's the most exciting race of all because it's downtown here, and the amount of riders we would have, we always have a lot more riders than anywhere else. And it was just totally exciting. I got started in the sport by some friends that used to see me riding all over Victoria. And he was from England, he used to race. So he stopped me one day and said, "Hey, do you want to come out to a race on Sunday?" A time trial it was. And I hemmed and hawed and said, "Well, okay." I went out there and I managed to come first. That was the thing that hooked me into racing bikes. It wasn't easy to win Gastown. It was to do with Ron Heyman. In 1976, he just got back from the Olympics at that time. And I managed to just barely beat Ron Heyman at the finish line. And he wasn't happy that I did that, because we had you had a number of corners coming around to the finish, and each corner he had a hard time trying to get by me. So he didn't like that, and he let me know it after the finish of it, but it was really hard for me to win in a sprint. The level it's gotten to is that the riders certainly come here and show that they love it to the max because they push really, really hard.
Don't take those, Elo. My name is Stephen Kim. I'm with Bicycle Sports Pacific. I raced BMX when I was a kid. Passionate about bikes. I loved watching the Tour de France. I had aspirations to follow a different career. Had an unfortunate bike accident. It kind of forced me to work in the industry, and here I am 33 years later.
What was your first experience with the Gastown Grand Prix?
Oh, kid in a candy store. Like literally, like I was that young kid and eyes wide open, wanting to be these guys, role models, passionate about the sport, love the racing, love the energy, and the venue, Gastown. It's the best venue for a bike race. I'm the guy that when I watch bike races, I don't watch the racers. I watch the cars, the team cars, the support team. And even to this day, when I watch the Tour de France, I always want to be those people following in the cars to help the racers. So when I had an opportunity to support and be mutual support for Gastown, it was easy commitment. Helping Gastown now for 6 years, going to my 6th year. So going there to watch guys like Alex Stita and Team 711, Roberto Gaggioli, and then the Coors Light team. So my thing for all the races is always about safety. My job is to help the organizers now not worry about a component of operating a bike race. So through my experience, setup, having our techs in place, having our wheels, pits, everything available, and getting ready for any last-minute racers coming in, needing some minor tech support. Well, I'm a firm believer the success of any event is because of sponsors and volunteers. And when it comes to the cycling industry, I'm also recognized that I'm in a position that I can actually help make a difference. So for me to see these events be successful, of course I want to be involved, right? We want to see these events always be around.
Okay, maybe this is the way I'm sitting. Okay. So I got into the sport because somebody said, hey, Gina, do you want to borrow my mountain bike to go for a ride? Because I was a bit of a gym rat. I went to the gym, worked out, and just rode the stationary trainer every single time I went there. So somebody gave me their mountain bike, and I went out by the trails up in Kelowna by myself, and I came back with like the biggest perma smile like I've ever had. I don't even think I can match it now. But so I rode mountain bikes, and then one of my friends said, do you want to go to this bike race at Silver Star and watch it? And I'm like, sure, that sounds fun, right? So went to Silver Star, watched it, and then they had a citizens race. And then my buddy said, do you want to race? I'm like, sure, looks fun, right? So raced that, and of course that was the sinker. And from then on, I got pretty hooked on mountain bike racing, and went to the BC Games. And at that time, at the BC Games, you had to ride the mountain bike and the road bike. You had no choice. If you wanted to enter, it was mountain bike and road bike, but I didn't have a road bike. So a local bike shop in Penticton gave me a road bike to use for the race. So I was able to race the provincials, or BC provincials there. And so I continued on mountain bike racing. And then I sold my car to buy a road bike because my coach said, hey, you should do some road biking to supplement your mountain bike training. So sold my car, got a road bike, rode to university on my road bike every year. I didn't get into the sport until university. And then someone said, and then they're, hey, do these races to train for mountain biking. I'm like, hey, whatever it takes, right? I'll do these races. And then a friend of mine said, Gina, we're looking for somebody to do a stage race out in Quebec. Do you want to join our road racing team? I'm like, yeah, I don't road race. They're like, no, you're a good sprinter. You should come out and be our sprinter for this race. And I'm like, okay. So went out to Quebec and did really well. And from then on, I got my first pro contract for road racing. And I said, okay, I'll road race as long as I can still mountain bike race. And eventually road racing definitely took over. Throughout my road racing career, then somebody said, Gina, you'd be really good on the track. Why don't you take my track bike and go on and try the track? And so that was it. And then I started racing the track, and that came naturally because I was a road sprinter. And eventually that led me to going to the 2008 Beijing Olympics on the track for the points race.
What's a fond memory of the Gastown event? As a three-time winner, you've got to have a lot of good memories of that.
You know, the event in itself, it was a hometown for me because I was living in Vancouver and Victoria, and to have this magnitude of event in my hometown, as far as the crowds, the organization, was, you know, very similar to the big races all over the world, and it was in my hometown. So, you know, the race itself was amazing with the cobblestones, and the roughness of the start and finish. The start-finish line was just You didn't have that anywhere else in the world. That roughness of the final sprint was none other. But I would say those things they'll be staples in my mind forever.
So since we brought the event back, we incorporated a youth category, and it was one of the mandates that we wanted to make sure that not only with equal prize money between men and women that we started that process, it was also making sure that we engaged the youth in the sport, because we wanted to create an atmosphere that created that spark and passion within that individual as well, to say, I one day want to be on this start line as well, doing this at the pro level. I think that's been very successful, because if we look at historically now some of those athletes over these last 10 years that have come up from that junior kind of ranking to now U23 in the elite categories and being very successful on the world scene, their first experiences were part of that youth event. If there's athletes and people, watching it from the sidelines, hopefully again having this in Vancouver provides that opportunity to be exposed to the sport, and having them then reach out to the provincial organizations of Cycling BC is a great point of entry for them to come in. Cycling BC has done a wonderful job as well with their hop-on program, where they go to schools and give the opportunity for school-age children to take part in a ride clinic. And that's been growing very successfully over the last few years, and that model is being emulated now across Canada. So I think we're in a very good position now to have the sport, become well known, grow, and through Global Relay support with the Bridge the Gap Fund, help deserving Canadian athletes get through those amateur years and be able to be sustainable that way, to help them get to events or pay for some of those costs, to give them the opportunity to become a professional athlete or represent Canada at the Olympics, in the future. I'd like to use this opportunity to say thank you to, first off, the Global Relay for contributing not only the financial means to bring this event back and keep it going, but also all of the volunteers, for the staff that are taking part as volunteers to make this event happen, and the BIA for giving us the opportunity to put an event like this on in their neighborhood in the city of Vancouver. Because without the support of all the different stakeholders and businesses and local residents, this wouldn't be possible. So, on behalf of the athletes, I think I can speak on behalf of those athletes and the teams of past generations and the future. Thank you for contributing and making this event happen possible.
Standing on the start line with just before the race and the national anthem going, and then the steam clock goes off, I actually have goosebumps right now thinking about it, and I can recreate those feelings of being on that start line, and the crowd was just insane, the enthusiasm and the excitement, it was just unbelievable.
It was really just the crowds. The crowds that you got at Gastown were on par of anything you'd see in the world, from World Championships to like the Philly Liberty Classic. And Gastown had those crowds that made the energy what it needed to be a big race. It was awesome.
I don't know that I would want to be competing against the athletes of today. They certainly at the speeds that they're going.
To watch how fast they go now, I really have a hard time wondering if I was even coming close to that.
Gastown is the premier event. I'm counting the days down. I can't wait to be there. It's the energy. Again, if you've never experienced Gastown, you have to go. Even if you're a non-cycling fan, it's just a great event to be a part of.